In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said, "Be careful not to do your acts of righteousness before people to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets as the hypocrites do in the synagogue and on the streets to be honored by people. I tell you the truth, they have received their reward in full. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you. And when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by people. I tell you the truth, they have received their reward in full. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you. And when you fast, do not look somber as the hypocrites do, for they disfigure their faces to show people that they are fasting. I tell you the truth, they have received their reward in full. But when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face, so that it will not be obvious to people that you are fasting, but only to your Father who is unseen, and your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and rust do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Tonight we begin our Lenten worship series that we've titled 8 Extreme Makeovers of Easter. It seems that in every direction we look in our society today, we are confronted with one extreme makeover of one kind or another. You can hardly turn on the television these days without coming across somebody who's receiving an extreme makeover in terms of their external appearances with their cosmetics, or being told what not to wear anymore and given a whole new wardrobe, or a house that's dilapidated and gets a complete and extreme makeover into a new kind of domicile. We want to think about the kinds of extreme makeovers that our Easter faith makes possible in our lives, and we'll take the whole season of Lent to do that. Our theme tonight is from phony hypocrisy to authentic life. I think the main reason some people give for not being a part of a congregation is that, in their opinion, the church is just full of hypocrites. What is it, I wonder, about us religious folk that seems to impress non-religious folk in such a negative way? I think it may be because we preach and teach about a fully committed life that we live in only a half-committed way. We do the work of religion, but from motives that are far from being religious. In this passage from Matthew, Jesus refers to 3 great works of the religious life: almsgiving, prayer, and fasting. He didn't complain or chafe against these practices. What troubled him was that so often in human life, the finest things were done for the wrong motives. There were, in Jesus' day, people who made a show of their religion for the attention that it would bring to themselves. William Barclay caught the unworthy motive of the hypocrites Jesus railed against, and he described them this way: "It was Jesus' warning that when these things were done with the sole intention of bringing glory to the doer, they lost by far the most important part of their value. A man may give alms, not really to help the person to whom he gives, but simply to demonstrate his own generosity and to bask in the warmth of someone's gratitude and all people's praise. A woman may pray in such a way that her prayer is not really addressed to God, but to her fellow men and women. Her praying may simply be an attempt to demonstrate her exceptional piety in such a way that no one can fail to see it. A man may fast, not really for the good of his own soul, not really to humble himself in the sight of God, but simply to show the world what a splendidly self-disciplined character he is. People may practice good works simply to win praise from other people, to increase their own prestige, and to show the world how good they are for the sake of their own credit. as Jesus saw it, religious acts done for the unrighteous motive of self-credit do have their own kind of reward. They garner to the doer the praise of people, and that is their reward, and their only reward. In fact, the word and the expression used in the Greek version of what Jesus said is better translated, they have received payment in full. They have received the praise of people, but that is all they will ever get. People outside the faith are quick to spot such phony motives. They are right to call us hypocrites at such times because at such times our motives are not genuine. They are dishonest goodness posing as righteous deeds. We say what we are and do is to the glory of God, but we are too eager to divert that glory to ourselves instead. That is what phony hypocrisy looks like. What Jesus calls us to is an authentic faith and life. I like this word, authentic. It means genuine. It means being actually and exactly what is claimed. It means actual character, not counterfeited, not imitated, not adulterated character. An authentic Christian is someone who is genuinely honest and transparent about their motives for doing good. In this way, they become invisible so their good works can glorify God. I once knew a man like this. He was a man who rarely crossed the threshold of the church that I served at the time, but he was a man with a pure heart. Bonnie and Sally and I were guests in his house for a few days, actually for a whole week during the blizzard of 1975, when the parsonage had been without heat for 2 days, and just as the furnace had been repaired and was beginning to warm the house up again, the whole community lost power for a whole week. We got retrieved from that dark, cold parsonage, surrounded by 3 feet of snow, and whisked to this man's home where his wife had a fire in the fireplace and bowls of stew waiting for her young preacher and his family. Several times during the week that we were sheltered by their hospitality, I accompanied our host on sorties into the neighborhood to help others in need of his handyman skills. He served with the Spirit of Christ hovering over him. He did so in a way that called absolutely no attention to himself. He did not communicate in any way a need or a desire to be thanked or recognized. He was not doing good because of what it would do for him. He was doing good because righteous acts were needed by those who received his good deeds. That's what an authentic life looks like. There's another meaning for this word authentic that I think is also especially helpful. It means conforming to an original so as to reproduce essential features of that original. We speak, for example, of a home that is an authentic reproduction of a colonial farmhouse. It's not a cheap knockoff. It's not an enhanced version replete with modern conveniences. It is an authentic reproduction so that one would have difficulty telling the difference between the reproduction and the original. So to be an authentic Christian means that we strive to be a genuine reproduction of Jesus Christ, who is the original after which our life seeks to be patterned. The question is, how do we get to that original? How do we authenticate the life and spirit of Jesus in our own life and spirit? How does this extreme makeover of Easter, this transformation from phony hypocrisy to authentic faith and life take place? Well, Jesus said 4 behaviors cause this transformation. 4 righteous acts done from the right motive of glorifying God and not ourselves lead us into an authentic Christian life that is a genuine reproduction of the life of Christ. And those 4 behaviors are praying, fasting, giving to the needy, and storing up treasures in heaven so your heart will follow them there. It is not by accident that the 3 pillars or disciplines of the Lenten season are prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. As we hear about these 3 disciplines of the Christ-like life, let the extreme makeover of our life and our spirit begin, even here and now.
Prayer. Lent is a time when we are encouraged to spend more time in prayer. as a primary way of drawing closer to the Lord. The pace of life crowds in on all our friendships to the point that we're not able to spend the time required to maintain, renew, and enjoy these relationships. The peripheral busyness of our lives can keep us from the core business of life, which is pursuing our relationship with God. We need to pray for God's grace so that we may live in a faithful relationship with Him through Christ. We need to pray for others who are struggling to find their way into a meaningful faith. And we need to pray for those who are alienated from the Christian community so that they may be reconciled to God and their brothers and sisters in Christ.
Fasting. The early church fasted intensely for the 2 days before Easter. The fast began on Good Friday and extended through Holy Saturday, so that when the day of resurrection dawned, the celebration of the risen Christ would be experienced, both spiritually and physically, as the fast was broken. This 2-day period, known as the Paschal Fast, predated Lent as we know it. Fasting has several dimensions. It is sometimes practiced as a way to develop self-control. It is often seen as an aid to prayer, as the pangs of hunger remind us of our hunger for God. A third dimension of fasting was emphasized by the prophet Isaiah, who insisted that fasting without changing our behavior is not pleasing to God. Isaiah chapter 58, verses 6 and 7, record these words of the prophet. "This, rather, is the fasting that I wish, releasing those bound unjustly, untying the thongs of the yoke, setting free the oppressed, breaking every yoke, sharing your bread with the hungry, sheltering the oppressed and the homeless, clothing the naked when you see them, and not turning your back on your own." Fasting should be linked to our concern for those who are forced to fast by their poverty, those who suffer from the injustices of our economic and political structures, those who are in need for any reason. Fasting is linked to living out our baptism. By our baptism, we are charged with the responsibility of showing Christ's love to the world, especially to those in need. Fasting can help us realize the suffering that so many people in our world experience every day, and it should lead us to greater efforts to alleviate that suffering. Abstaining from certain foods, such as meat, creates a spiritual link between us and those whose sparse diets seldom, if ever, provide them with meat for their meals.
Almsgiving. Financial contributions to alleviate the suffering of the poor is a basic way to fulfill our baptismal commitment to care for others. Works of charity and the promotion of justice are integral parts of the Christian way of life that we began at our baptism. Tonight's offering gives us a chance to practice this ancient tradition of almsgiving as we present our tithes and offerings.